same time. We're following the live events in Israel. We just did that. We're also following the live events in the occupied West Bank and right here inside the Gaza Strip. This is Khan Younis in the south of the Strip, and we have been waiting for a number of hours now for the 1,700 Palestinian detainees to be released by Israel. It is now happening. We knew that the buses were on their way from the jails where they had been kept in Israel over to the Gaza Strip, and they have now arrived in Khan Younis. 1,700 Palestinians who were taken from Gaza. You see the standard issue clothes that they're wearing from those Israeli prisons, who were taken from Gaza at various points during the war, and now, as part of this ceasefire deal, being released. We have on site Al Jazeera's Tareq Azzoum. You are at Nasser Hospital, which is in Khan Younis. You've been waiting for this for a number of hours, as have the families, by the way, of those Palestinian prisoners. Tell us who they are, and tell us also what that wait has been like.
Well, as a part of the ceasefire deal that has been brokered between Hamas and Israel, 1,700 Palestinian detainees will be released today. And this is the scene at the moment, as you can quite see now. We can see thousands of Palestinians inside Nasser Hospital are getting ready in order to welcome the Palestinian released detainees. The scenes at the moment are quite intense and emotional as well, where people have been gathering from the early hours of this morning in anticipation of being reunited again with their loved ones who have been detained and arrested by the Israeli military after October the 7th. Those Palestinian detainees are expected to be released within very short time and arrive to Nasser Hospital, and we show different field preparations by the International Committee of the Red Cross in coordination with Gaza's Health Ministry. Medical teams are on the site now, and they are waiting for them to turn up in this location. They will be completely examined by medical teams, giving the prolonged period of detention in Israeli jails and the horrific conditions they have been enduring in Israeli jails. We have heard from families on the ground that they did not have any further information about the fate of their relatives who have gone missing during the Israeli ground operations across and in multiple areas in the Strip. And for them, they only realize that they are alive once they are announced on the list of release today, and a part of the efforts made by the International Committee of the Red Cross, they have informed the families of detainees to completely get ready in order to be reunited with their loved ones. These scenes are quite emotional, and for now we can understand that 3 buses are approaching to the site in Al-Nasser Hospital, and for many Palestinians, they realize that Palestinian prisoners and detainees will be released today in groups and in patches. So we are getting now reports that Palestinian detainees started to turn up to the site. We can see now 3 buses are on the gate of the hospital, and they will be able to shortly approach our site. They will firstly go inside that building that you can see in the frame in order to carry out initial medical examination, and then later they will be released from this direction to be reunited with their loved ones. We can see also some field preparations by local civilian police who are trying to maintain security as well. I cannot really describe how joyful is the scene at the moment, given the prolonged period of disconnection between the families and their relatives who have been detained by the Israeli military. People believe that this moment is quite historic, and for them, we can hear now the sound of bullets and gunshots being fired by families who are celebrating the return of the Palestinian detainees. So this is an exceptional day for families, and those families, by the way, have come from different parts of Gaza. Most of them have come from the northern part of the Strip, and 100 others have arrived from the central and southern parts of the territory. They are quite determined to meet their loved ones. They say that they cannot wait anymore, as they have been going through an endless cycle of desperation regarding the fate of their relatives who have gone missing and the later were detained by the Israeli military, and for those who were detained inside schools, shelters, and during the Israeli military attempts to control significant portions of the Strip, Cyril.
Tareq, can I check something with you that you mentioned a little while back? Are you telling us that the families who have come here, the families of these men, women, and children, because there are children in these buses, people who have been held without charge by Israel during the course of this war, are you telling us that these families didn't know until today or perhaps yesterday whether their relatives were even alive?
Well, they did not realize any information or even get any source of confirmation by relevant authorities about the fate of their relatives and their sons who have gone detained by the Israeli military. They were shocked. We can see the scale and the milestone of happiness written all over their faces at the moment. But for them, this moment is very exceptional. They say that we have been here since yesterday evening, and they have slept in the open, just waiting to see their loved ones are coming out from the ICRC buses in order to be reunited with them. They say that they have gone through horrific security conditions once the Israeli military started to expand the ground operations across Gaza in October the 7th. And for many Palestinians, there has been a general sense of consensus that the Israeli military has dealt with Palestinian males as clear targets, either for killing or for arrest or detention. That has been a clear pattern recorded in Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, in Khan Younis, in Rafah, and all areas that have been marked as an active war zone. And other Palestinians are still waiting here, even in the hope of getting any information about other detainees who have not been yet released, according to the current ceasefire deal and its first phase. So there is a huge sense of anticipation for those families who are waiting here. We can see on the faces now how they are waiting patiently, just for one moment, is to see them alive, to see them without clear wounds on their bodies, without being physically emaciated or exhausted, because they understand totally and completely that Palestinian detainees in Israeli jails have been receiving a very humiliating treatment. And this is not the first time. If we are talking about detainees who have been detained decades ago, they have been also receiving the same treatment. So the equation now is quite different, and for them they realize that this moment is quite symbolic and historic regarding their description for the entire day to be a victory for Palestinian families.
Tareq, these Palestinians who are returning to Gaza, they are returning to a very different place. Between the time when they were taken by Israel and the time now that we're seeing, 90% of homes have been destroyed or damaged, 10% of the population has been killed or injured. There are entire parts of the Gaza Strip where there is simply nothing left. I mean, they might be coming home to find that their families have been killed and that their houses have been destroyed.
Well, let me start first, Cyril, by the January ceasefire. I was extensively covering all developments regarding the release of Palestinian detainees and Israeli captives. And I saw throughout the interviews that I really did with the families of detainees and with the detainees themselves, how they were shocked once they were released from the scale of destruction. They saw on the way from Karm Abu Salam crossing to Nasser, to the European hospital at that time, the scale of destruction inflicted upon Rafah and the eastern parts of the city of Khan Younis. They say that we were told inside the prison that Gaza now is a pile of rubble, and they were even forced to wait and see different kinds of images for Gaza as a destroyed landscape. And now we can see at the moment that there is some sort of preparation to receive the first batch of the Palestinian detainees, and for now we can completely give our viewers a better understanding about the conditions. Now, the first bus, as you can see, has now arrived, and we can see inside Palestinian detainees inside the bus and they are now moving to our location here. We can see that bus moving now among the crowds, and people are surrounding this vehicle, chanting and waving for detainees inside. Possibly we can see many Palestinians have relatives inside that bus, so have been behind the Israeli bars for a very long time. And people, we have heard from them, according to your question as well, Cyril, that those previously released detainees were shocked completely from the scale of destruction. And now, after 8 months of that time, and during the Israeli expansion of ground activities and operations across the Strip, the scale of destruction has mounted more and more, and people who are expected to be released today won't really be able to realize the landscape, as it has turned to be a barren, dusty desert, geographical areas that are filled with ruins and debris of shattered homes, schools, universities, medical healthcare centers. And for them, what is so important to say or even to feel at this moment is happiness. People have been really enduring endless amount of pain, scars in their hearts and minds about the losses of the houses, businesses, properties, and even the loved ones. And now they have been forced to endure for almost more than 2 years the pain of being away from their loved ones who have been detained by the Israeli military. And now for them, this is a moment of celebration. This is a moment of joy. And now, Cyril, we can see a second bus is moving forward to the site here. The process might take time until they will be released and will be completely undergoing initial medical examination to be later reunited with the loved ones. So the people here on the ground are really getting a sense of excitement about how short will be the time now in order to be reunited with those loved ones. And we can see members of the ICRC inside these vehicles, and it's worth reminding our viewers that the International Committee of the Red Cross has previously announced its readiness to facilitate the transportation and the delivery of Israeli captives and Palestinian detainees in a way that can guarantee full dignity and transparency as well for both sides of the conflict. So at the moment, Palestinian detainees are arriving. We can see them now. They are getting out of the windows of the bus and waving to their loved ones and eagerly looking for if there's any face that is familiar for them. This is the sense of belonging to this land and to this community. Those people have been really, Cyril, going through horrific times without shelter, times without really respite in terms of the bombardment, and times of psychological torment regarding the level of thoughts unfolding regarding the level of really nostalgia for their loved ones, and how they are right now waiting and fighting tooth and nail to be reunited with them. We can see now people are saluting those detainees. For Palestinian community, just to make our viewers get a better understanding, Palestinian detainees have some sort of a special symbolism in our community here. Those people have been seen and really perceived by many on the ground as heroes who have really endured horrific times inside Israeli jails. And according to the testimonies we have heard from previous previous released Palestinian detainees, they said that conditions inside Israeli jails are quite unbearable. We know that they have been forced to deal with huge psychological pressure, and they are right now moving gradually inside the medical center, and we can see that the medical teams are waiting for them. Medical teams are still waiting for them, and Palestinian detainees one by one are getting inside this medical center in order to be examined by medical teams and to be later reunited with the crowds of a site here.
Tareq, we can see very well actually these Palestinian detainees who are starting to get off the bus. There will be several buses given the large number of detainees involved, 1,700. So this may play out over perhaps even hours. We can see it very clearly. They're all wearing the gray prison clothes that have All right, Tareq, we're listening.
Yes, Cyril, now Palestinian detainees have started to completely be reunited. Once we can see a number of detainees now are getting out from the medical center, and security forces are trying to maintain the situation. Now we can see more buses are still moving on the ground, and they are full of detainees. We are expecting that 1,700 detainees will be released today as a part of the deal. We can see the scenes of jubilation around me, and now we can hear somebody on the speaker saying that, saying and telling the names of Palestinian detainees in order just to give a hint for their relatives to completely be aware that they will be released shortly. And the situation now is quite tense, and people are really still waiting to see their loved ones getting out from this medical center. Now, security members are trying to encircle the area so they can have some sort of organization and organizing for the entire ritual and this ceremonial event on the ground. So people are at the other side here, they are waiting, and they are still waiting. You can see how they are chanting and how they are celebrating by hearing the names of the Palestinian detainees who have arrived to the medical center and now given the permission to completely be reunited with the loved one. We can hear now a huge gunfire sound being heard, and now they are there in the frame, as you can see them. They are wearing Israeli shirts that were given them by the authority of jails, and now they are drinking water, having a sense of respite. They get some sort of a fresh air, regarding the prolonged period that they have spent behind Israeli jails. You can see now how they are lining up and waving to their loved ones. This scene is quite symbolic for Palestinians. They believe that the period that those detainees have spent in jails have changed their psychological and physical well-being. For many of them, they have been detained by the Israeli military with being physically fit, and now they are really looking older, with more medical complications being quite seen over their faces. It reflects the scale of exhaustion, in fact, to be noticed over their faces. Many of them, they say that before their release, especially regarding the affordability of food and water, we have heard from previous detainees that before the Israeli military released them from jails, they are completely being allowed to get some good amount of food and water. But for now, they are right now just a few seconds away to be reunited with the loved ones. And let's take a look now at the scene at the moment. This is the scene at the moment, and how Palestinian families are trying to be completely surrounding this area. This is a jubilation moment for many Palestinians. It's full of joy, happiness, and many mothers around us are really shedding tears of happiness. They say that we did not believe that Palestinian detainees will be released today due to the Israeli broken promises before and multiple delays that we have witnessed in previous ceasefires regarding the release of Palestinian detainees. So the situation remains very intense and filled with joy and with even celebration. Those detainees have been really going through horrific times. Even before their detention, they were forced to leave their houses. They have been under the threat of attack multiple times. And on the ground, we can see that those who are right now out of the jails possibly might not recognize the loved ones due to the level of change that has been made in Gaza, and even on the well-being of those families who are waiting at the other hand. Everyone here inside this square can really has been really going through difficult and unimaginable times. People say that we have gone through a period of famine, destruction, decimation for civilian infrastructure, and multiple times we have been under the threat of Israeli attacks. And despite all of this kind of pain, despite all level of suffering that they have been enduring, people have gathered here today, starting to celebrate, starting to wait patiently to see their loved ones free without any kind of restriction on their movement or even on their ability to live in their country under the current terms of the ceasefire deal. And for those families as well, they believe that Palestinian detainees must all be released from Israeli detention centers, given the Israeli wider-scale detention and arrest campaign that was really seen across multiple areas in Gaza. People say that once the Israeli military invade a certain geographical area, they usually try to surround and to invade main urban centers, including schools that were sheltering displaced families, and then later they used to start to split between women and men, and then later drive men to unknown sites. And as time passes, more families could realize by accident or even throughout an official communication from the ICRC that their relatives are behind the Israeli path during the Israeli ground offensive in that site. So the equation right now is still quite complex. People, despite these celebrations, they are still wary about the sustainability of the ceasefire. I've heard many of them are saying that Israel might start evading from committing to the terms of the agreement once all living and deceased captives will be released safely and successfully. And for now, people say that Palestinians have no clear guarantees regarding the continuation of the ceasefire. And for many Palestinians, they believe that now mediators with the United States will be the basic element to ensure the durability of the deal and to enforce Israel to stick to its key demands. And simultaneous to completely these celebrations, we know that more aid trucks are expected to cross into Gaza within these hours. So the situation remains extremely, very difficult. And for multiple families on the ground, they started to officially be reunited with their loved ones. We can see now in the frame how those detainees are reunited with their loved ones. The scenes are quite filled with happiness and cheer. For the record, it's very significant to illustrate for our viewers that this is the largest batch of detainees who have been released since the war began. And for many Palestinians, the preparations were massive, and the process of handing over Israeli captives to the ICRC have gone really smoothly without any kinds of challenges or even security threats. So there is, as an Israeli intention, to facilitate the first phase of the deal. But the question now, Cyril, remains whether we can see full continuation and further commitment from the Israeli side to carry out and to implement the second phase of the deal. It depends on the negotiations that mediators are trying to ensure its sustainability between Hamas and Israel. And for many Palestinians, they are still quite concerned from the concept of war resumption. Many people told me personally that they might really be shocked psychologically if the war resumed, because we showed that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians have moved to Gaza City after the Israeli withdrawal from the area, and now they have set up their makeshift tents again over the ruins of their destroyed homes. And even some of those detainees will return back now to Gaza City, not to live inside a beautiful decorated house, but inside either an overcrowded shelter or a makeshift tent that lacks all kinds of humanitarian and basic necessities. So they are moving from a grim and desperate reality to another one, especially in light of the Israeli instability regarding their commitment to the terms of the agreement. So that's what we can see, and that is the main sentiment on the ground. Those detainees will be reunited with their loved ones. They will be absolutely told by how difficult were the days without them, and how nights were filled with terror, with horror, and with multiple signs of devastation, as Israel was unrelentlessly targeting geographical areas, towns, cities, villages, and changed the geography and demography of Gaza. So for them, they might be now very happy regarding the release, but they will certainly be shocked by the stories that they will hear from their relatives and their loved ones once the entire celebration today ends and the release would be complicated. That is very, very emotional situation now. Families are unable to wait to be reunited with the loved ones, and security forces are trying till now to control the area. And we can see now one of the detainees is hanging and even embracing his relative and waving to their loved one, just giving them a sign that I am here and I am still alive, breathing, after months of imprisonment and really horrific times inside the Israeli jails, prolonged periods of interrogation by Israeli detectives, and the scale of physical and psychological torture that they have endured during that period. So what is so essential to see at the moment, or even to let our viewers understand, is the level of happiness. We can see now a father is embracing his released son now. They are unable even to leave each other. We can see people wearing Palestinian kufiya, and this is also a symbolism, and this is a symbolism for the Palestinian culture. Now we can see that more Palestinians are really greeting each other after this Palestinian detainee was released. Now we can see how his smile is really drawn on his face, and how he's now taken to the among the crowd so he can be reunited with the loved one. He raised the victory sign, which is locally known among Palestinians, and now he is waiting to, he's now even trying to meet and to be reunited with his brothers, his mother. This is a very, very emotional and spectacular scene that is full of joy. But till now, there are still more preparations being made. We understand that these preparations are quite complex due to the very large number of Palestinians who have arrived to the site in order to welcome the release of 1,700 Palestinian detainees. Till now, the speaker is still narrating and saying the names of Palestinian detainees, and on the other end there, we can see how they are quite happy here. Palestinian detainees, they have been brought off the shoulder, on the shoulder of the crowd, moving between them, saying hi for those faces that have come here today in order to welcome their own release. So these scenes of jubilations are quite impressive, and Palestinians say this is a moment that we might not see again, especially that for now those Palestinian detainees have been right now released under the terms of the agreement. And for what is so also essential to let our viewers get some drips of information about is that those detainees, many of them have lost their loved ones inside the jails, and for lots of people at the other end there that you can see, they are welcoming the release of the detainees. Just over that site there, people are still moving to welcome them, and the atmosphere is still very, very tense regarding the presence of families, how they are really going through some sort of really impression about, and they are quite impressive about the scale of crowd here that is causing some sort of challenges for security forces to keep controlling and facilitating the process of releasing the Palestinian detainees. It's very significant also to tell our viewers that Palestinian detainees will be reunited with the loved ones inside areas that have been previously marked as an active war zone, and it's very significant to let also the viewer realize the fact that many of those Palestinians have been unable to communicate with the loved ones inside the Israeli jails. I can see now many of those detainees have lost half of their weight due to the prolonged period of detention, and on the other end there we can see that more and more detainees are still coming from the buses that are stationed at the other end of the corridor, where people say that they did not realize much of their loved ones once they have shown up to the side. They say that their feature, their facial expressions, their facial even features have completely changed due to the prolonged and long period of detention. We can see different scenes of a stampede at the moment for the crowds who are still on the side waiting to meet their loved ones. The scene looks very intense at the moment due to the large number, of course, of detainees who are now being released by the Israeli authorities. But Cyril, at Nasser Hospital, this is the first time that we can see a release of Palestinian detainees to be carried out from this location. We're used to be reporting from the European hospital, but the European hospital was razed by the Israeli military a couple of months ago and caused significant destruction to medical wards and even buildings. So it was very difficult to reorganize this event there. And for now, people are still flowing, by the way, to the sites here in order to celebrate the return of those detainees, Cyril.
Tareq, we're watching all those pictures with you. Thank you very much for walking us through every step of this, and you're going to stay with us. We're going to let you take a very, very short break. Just a moment ago, we saw a young man be reunited with a boy who couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. Whether that was his son, we can't say for sure. It certainly looked that way at that point. And that really was an embodiment of what Tareq has been reporting, a word he has just said multiple times: happiness, and how happy people are at this moment and over what it represents, and the hope that there is right now in the Gaza Strip that this is the beginning of a permanent end to the war. There is a question mark over that, of course. There is some uncertainty, as Tareq has reminded us. It is also impossible not to remind ourselves when you see these people who have just been released from Israeli jails be handed a bottle of water. It's impossible not to remind ourselves that they are being released to a territory, the Gaza Strip, the half of the Gaza Strip that currently is not occupied by Israeli troops. And that territory has been devastated. And it is currently undergoing a famine that has been man-made by Israel. It is the United Nations that has officially declared that, the first ever recorded famine in the Middle East. So that is the situation as we watch 1,700 Palestinian detainees. You see the large crowds there in Khan Younis, that's in the southern part of the Gaza Strip. 1,700 detainees who are being brought to Nasser Hospital, where we understand that they will be not only reunited with members of their families, but also will be undergoing some medical checks. So happiness, the key word there, as Tareq was telling us. I want to turn, even as we continue to watch this, to Al Jazeera correspondent Nida Ibrahim. Nida, I think in this moment, even as we watch this, it's important to remind our viewers, these were people who were taken from Gaza, held without charge. That's why we're not saying prisoner. They are detainees. And there are still detainees from Gaza that are held by Israel. So despite the happiness, not everybody is being released. Not all the detainees are being sent back to Gaza.
And do you know, Cyril, that we don't know how many people were detained from Gaza are currently inside Israeli jails?
Because there hasn't been that accountability.
There hasn't been any answers given to any human rights organization about the numbers of Palestinians detained after the war from Gaza. So
could they have potentially twice as many? We don't know.
According to some estimates, they might have up to 6,000 Palestinians from Gaza. 2,500 or 2,700 of those are believed to be detained under what Israel calls unlawful combatants law. That's why they hold them, including, by the way, the prominent Palestinian Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, who decided to remain with his patients and doctors when Israel decided to detain him. He is held under this law of unlawful combatants. So
give us a word on him, because he's somebody that many viewers will remember, right? They might not specifically remember his name, but they have probably seen him on TV. They might have seen him on their social media. He was the face, kind of the medical presence and the medical effort in Gaza. And he always said throughout various military raids across hospitals that he would stay with his patients until the end. He always refused to leave the hospital.
I will add to that and then tell you a bit about him. I'll add to that that even when his lawyer goes to prison now to meet with him and talk to him, his first question to her is, how are the doctors inside Gaza? Because he not only did he leave his patients, but he left doctors who decided to stay and perform their duty to the maximum, actually going way beyond the call of duty in these horrific circumstances, and decide to save lives despite the Israeli pressures. He's a man who has refused to leave the hospital when the Israeli forces surrounded it. And then there's this iconic picture of him walking towards an Israeli tank, that kind of also helped show the world the image of Israel, the real image of Israel, when it has been detaining medical staff as well as Palestinians who had nothing to do with anything. By the way, the 1,700 Palestinians that we are seeing being released right now, admittedly by Israel, have nothing to do with the October 7th attack.
Explain.
That means that they were detained after Israeli forces raided and went inside Gaza and started detaining people, whether they are related or unrelated. The fact that they are related and the fact that they were not served with any charges confirms that Israel has no reason for detaining them other than intimidating the population, instilling fear, and also trying to push for people to leave Gaza altogether. All of that is linked to Israel's plans that they were considering to do in Gaza, which is to try and kick people out of the Strip altogether, one man at a time. And these kind of detentions, putting them in this psychological horror, putting them in prisons that were established particularly for people who were arrested from Gaza, shows that the intention was to inflict more fear and inflict more psychological trauma on the Palestinians. And we have seen even Israeli doctors come out from these military camps that were specifically established to host, let's say, or put Gaza prisoners in. These Israeli doctors were saying, you know what, we've seen too much. We have to come out and say that there's a torture, there's abuse, there's sexual harassments against Palestinians inside Israeli detention centers. So again, going back to the point of these people had nothing to do with the attack, they still were arrested anyways. One of our correspondents, and people might recognize him, Ibrahim al-Khalili, he told me today his brother is going to be among those who are released. Why? Both of them were in a Shifa hospital in Gaza when the Israeli forces detained the hospital. Both arrested Ibrahim and his brother. Ibrahim was later released, but his brother was inside jail. Does he know what happened to him? No. If he did not see his name in the list, he would not have known that his brother is alive. That's the level that we're talking about, which is why it's not an exaggeration, Cyril, when we say that these people are coming out from the dead.
Nida, stay with us. We're watching this, large crowds. This is happening in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, specifically Khan Younis, more specifically the hospital compound of Al-Nasser, and that is where 1,700 Palestinian detainees have been brought to after being detained by Israel for a large part, perhaps most, of this war. As Nida was explaining, we have very little information because the Israeli authorities have not been responding to queries. So how many people are they still detaining? As we said, without charging them, we don't know precisely. But they are now being released. As our correspondent Tareq in near Al-Nasser Hospital was explaining, many of their relatives who have come here today only got confirmation today or yesterday that their family members were even still alive. That is how little information and how little transparency there has been about all of this. Okay, we can go back to Tareq Abu Azzoum, who is near Al-Nasser. Tareq, we can tell from these pictures that this is going to be a long process, and that stands to reason, given that there are so many people who are being released. What are you seeing?
That's right, Cyril. There is a huge crowd of people are still inside the square, and which complicates really a smooth delivery and transporting for the Palestinian detainees security forces are still trying to maintain security and discipline in the area. We were really battling in the past few minutes to completely organize a real life here. The scene is quite epileptic and chaotic. So, but for now, we saw a very limited number of Palestinian detainees have been reunited with the families. Others are still inside this medical center in order to be examined and even to witness some sort of tranquility outside. So we can see crowds still waiting for them, but the sense is still very frustrating. There is an epileptic condition now for the release of those detainees, but for now we understand totally that the process of releasing Palestinian detainees is still ongoing. There was no significant challenges being imposed on the process, but there is some sort of a turbulent sentiment of frustration, along with also disorganized mechanism so far due to the large number of people now inside this medical center. So we are still monitoring and waiting for Palestinian detainees to be released. And now we can see one of those released detainees with his loved ones. He has a long period. The situation for them sounds to be very difficult inside Israeli prisons. Now, for many of those Palestinians, they will continue to wait until all Palestinian detainees are released, and they are waiting also to drive them back once to where the houses have been stood and to where their loved ones were waiting for them days and months passionately and even eagerly to be reunited with them. This sentiment is quite simultaneous to organize. For many Palestinians, they are unable to control their feelings, they are unable even to control the acts, because what they have gone through is simply unbearable. And for many of those who have gathered here, they believe that this day will pass, this pain also will end if both sides of the conflict will be completely sticking to the terms of the agreement. That is the situation for now, Cyril, and more Palestinian detainees are still coming from that direction in the front of the gates of Nasser Hospital via the ICRC buses, and they will be very soon reunited with the loved ones.
Tareq, stand by. It is 1300 GMT, almost on the dot. I'm Cyril Vanier. You've just been listening to our correspondent, Tareq Azzoum. You're watching Al Jazeera's continuing coverage of the first phase of the 20-point ceasefire plan for Gaza. It's been a pivotal moment in a breakthrough ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The Israeli military has released nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees in exchange for the 20 remaining living Israeli captives. Well, that includes more than 1,700 Palestinians that were detained in Gaza since the war began. Buses carrying the detainees have been arriving in Khan Younis. That is what we are watching live. They were and still are being greeted by large crowds. They will now have medical examinations and be reunited with their families. Back to Tareq Azzoum, who is within the compound of Al Nasser Hospital. That's what you see on your screen. This is Al Nasser Hospital. Tareq, you've begun to see detainees get off those buses. You've been walking us through it, and be reunited, for some of them, with their families. But look, the point that we will make now and make again later is that they are coming back to a Gaza Strip that is very different from the one they knew, especially for the ones who have spent the longest time in those Israeli jails. They're coming back to a strip that has been devastated, and some of them, we don't know this, but we can only assume, given that 10% of the population of the Gaza Strip has been killed or injured, some of them will be coming back to find out that some of their relatives have been killed in this war.
It's very important to understand this point. Those detainees did not get any kind of information or update about Gaza's condition inside Israeli jails, and for many Palestinians, for many released detainees, they will return back to a landscape that has been quite shattered by destruction. We understand that basic figures released from Gaza's authorities suggest that the Israeli military destroyed over 90% of Gaza's buildings, or causing severe damage for what remains of it. And we know that the vast majority of agricultural landscape has been razed by Israeli bulldozers. And on the ground, there is a fragile sense of medical services continuity as well, in light of the Israeli ongoing restrictions on aid supplies till now to Gaza. The situation for those released detainees will not be the same they once knew about Gaza. This land has been now changed for decades to come and left behind generational scars, and the generation that has been gone through unrelenting scale of trauma and psychological pressure, especially those children who have lost their parents, and they have been forced to deal with an uncertain future. But for now, those detainees are still coming to and arriving to Nasser Medical Complex. This is the second largest medical facility across Gaza after Shifa Medical Complex was razed and even destroyed by the Israeli military. And for now, the situation remains very intense and fluid, full of changes and full of deep emotional weight that families have been carrying. Cyril, what I can say for sure is that those detainees will certainly be shocked by the momentum of destruction and how even people's mindsets have changed during the 2 years of genocide that has stripped Gaza from every single component of a dignifying and beautiful life.
Tareq Azzoum reporting from near Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis in the southern part of the Strip. You see the large crowds there. That's for the 1,700 Palestinian detainees originally from Gaza who were taken by Israel, held without charge, and are now being released as part of the first step in this ceasefire plan. Remember that earlier this morning, the last remaining Israeli captives held by Hamas and other armed groups within Gaza were detained. This was in exchange for them. 1,700 Palestinian detainees and 250 Palestinian prisoners who have been released and are still being released, many of them to the occupied West Bank, some of them to occupied East Jerusalem. That is where we are right now. We're going to head north, still inside the Gaza Strip, to